You did that? I thought there was a spider. Because there's so many spiders in the basement, bro. My first, dude, that's my greatest fear, is spiders. And, okay, so my two greatest fears, spiders and traffic. Okay, and I'm not in traffic right now, so it must have been a spider. What's up, Scrub Hub?
All right,
man. It's good to be back.
It's good. I'm glad you're back. How you doing?
I'm doing great. You know, I admittedly have a little bit of back issues. So if I twitch a little bit, I move around.
Or lay down.
Don't worry about it. Or if I lay down, I might spread out a little bit. Go ahead, spread out. For all my Dave Chappelle fans out there, but I'm doing great. Doc, how are you doing today?
Dude, I'm good. I'm good.
That's awesome.
I'm glad to have you back. My face feels weird at the moment. Sorry. I shifted in a weird way. It messed me up. Anyway, guys, what's up? I'm Doc Bishop.
I am NevrEndingPants, and welcome to Scrub Hub. This, I think, would be categorized as another episode of the shorts.
Yeah.
And what game are we going over
This is
today,
shorts,
Doc?
and we are talking about a game. Is it an indie game? Is it classified as indie?
That's an interesting question. I think it might be an indie game, but
it's a game brought to you by the
that.
people, which we did not look up, who did Pony Island.
Doc knows that.
Which we have not played. We should play. I've been told we should play that. Anyway, we're talking about Inscryption.
Inscryption.
The card game.
Slash
escape room. Like, that's how it was presented to me. I think when it was like, it's a card game, but then an escape room because you're in a cabin.
Yeah. I think that's a really good. I want to say it's a story game too. I want to throw that in.
Yeah, sure. There's a story.
I think it's a pretty good story to it.
So let's talk about the game. So you start the game and you're met face to face. Here's what I liked about it. Right? You're met kind of face to face. You don't know who this person is. You're playing a game. You're given through a tutorial of the game, kind of like, oh, this does this does this. And the person across from you, across the table, if you will, has this like D&D game master, dungeon master kind of air about them.
Yeah.
And it's super cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting to start out and you're like, okay, gonna start playing this game. Which, you know, I think immediately I want to take just a small step backwards. When I first started,
go for it. Yeah,
right off the rip, as soon as you start the game, there's no new game.
There's not. Oh, you're right.
There's no new games. So you even on the start menu, you're like, what do I do?
You just continue.
And you know, we're both streamers.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a super interesting time for me personally. I start up the game and I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on, y'all? And the chat's like, yo, it was just so exciting to be on the start menu, and there's intrigue already.
Yeah, you're like, what's going on? So
you hit the load new game.
Yep.
You load the new game, and then
or continue game.
Bam, right into where Doc's picking up with the you're met with this dungeon master style.
So this game I immediately had flashbacks to a game called Hand of Fate. Okay.
Yes.
Hand of Fate was a game where you played as a person, and then you had the dealer, and the dealer's dealing you cards. These cards were sometimes your weapons, your armor, different story effects, things that you experienced. I was like, oh, and because you have a map and you have this piece that's moving. And I'm like, oh, this is like Hand of Fate. This is going to be dope. I'm going to enjoy this. And so you're literally being taught the game. The game plays. It's actually kind of unique, right? I always wanted to compare it to Magic. Your cards are like monsters, right? So you have like squirrels, you have wolves, you have different things. They have attack, they have a defense, and you're attacking or defending against your opponent.
But this is kind of interesting in terms of other Magic, like you said, it's in some ways comparable to Magic because
the attack defense, it's actually closer to Yu-Gi-Oh. because you're actually, to play bigger monsters, you're sacrificing.
Right, you sacrifice in different ways too. You pay different prices for different kinds of cards.
Some stuff costs blood.
The the card game itself is actually quite intuitive with combining different mechanics from different card games. I think it's have you played a lot of different card games, Doc? Because
Yeah.
I know you play Magic.
I used to play Magic. I've played Hearthstone. I've played
Yu-Gi-Oh. You play much
I
Yu-Gi-Oh?
played Yu-Gi-Oh before. I've played Pokemon, like actual card games. I played Digimon,
Yeah.
Final Fantasy. I mean, and if it's a card game, I played it. Vanguard.
Cool.
I've never played Vanguard.
For my
I
experience,
just threw it in the list because some people like it.
in my experience, for the most part, I'm a Magic player. I have played Pokemon TCG. It's also a ton of fun too. So when I started this game
It's
up,
true.
I started noticing, I was like, oh man, that's kind of like a magic effect, like the death touch, like any amount of
Oh, yeah,
damage
yeah.
dealt to this creature would kill it.
You had kind of like a trample effect, a death touch. You had flying.
Right. But something
Um,
interesting about this is it kind of has a front line and a back line type deal, right? To where your front line is on your side are the creatures that you've summoned. They're just
Yeah.
there. But on the enemy side, you see front line that are the creatures that you know are there to attack. Sometimes it's completely open so you can swing through.
Yep.
And there's always a back line. And on the back line, you can see creatures that are pre-summoned. I
like
guess you could call it.
They're what's going to be played the next
They're going to
round.
move up into the next zone or the front line. If you, all of our RPG people out there that have played, it's funny we were just talking
Some
about that.
tactical RPG stuff, frontline, backline stuff.
Right.
We should play one of those.
Right. So it kind of has this interesting frontline backline. So it adds an extra layer of depth in terms of your strategy, right? So with being a card game that has, as I said, interesting mechanics of different card games and stuff like that, was super cool to be like, oh man, I can't do that because that flyer is going to move up next turn. Like I knew it took out the. Well, actually, it's not that it took out the effect of not knowing what my enemy was going to do, but now it's, oh, I know what my enemy is going to do next turn, but I don't know what they're going to do the turn after that too.
Right.
So that was super cool. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah. So the game plays like on your turn, you have two decks, right?
That's
you
right.
You have your main deck, and this is super important. I'm going to touch on this. You have your main deck of cards, which have things like your wolves or your elks or whatever. And then you have a second deck, which is purely squirrels.
That's right.
And the squirrels, like I said, some cards have a cost, some cards don't. Squirrels are free, but you can only draw one card a turn. So on your turn, you get to draw from your squirrels, which are free creatures, but they're 0/1s. So they have no attack. They're solely for sacrificing. So if like maybe you have an ant in your hand, which requires one sacrifice, and you're like, hey, I can win playing this card, you would draw a squirrel, play your squirrel, sacrifice your squirrel, play your ant, and then it attacks. So it's a draw phase, a play phase, automatically goes into an attack phase.
You have to click the bell.
You click the bell, which
So you
is
click
saying
the
ending your
combat
turn, and then
phase,
all
yeah.
your creatures attack regardless. It doesn't matter. You have a creature on the field, it attacks. And it either hits an empty space, which deals direct damage to your opponent, or it hits their creatures, which may or may not kill it.
And there are also certain abilities that your creatures can have, like there's certain things where it will swing not forward, but sometimes it'll swing to the left, or like kind of what's that mathematical term? Like perpendicular. It'll attack perpendicular to you. That's not correct. Okay, I'm not smart. Adjacent. It'll attack adjacent
Diagonal?
to you. I mean a diagonal.
It is
or
diagonal.
adjacent. I'm not smart. I think two of those words are the
Orthogonal?
same thing. Huh?
Orthogonal?
Orthogonal? That's a word that I don't understand at all.
Orthogonal is not diagonal. So it's forward or
Oh,
sideways.
I see. I got you. But so there's a lot of different ways that combat can actually resolve, and
Right.
but that was super cool too.
But mostly the game is broken into a draw step, a play step, an end step, which automatically does combat. Then it goes to your opponent's turn, and you already know what they're playing because it's on the back row. We talked about that.
Mhm.
So that stuff either moves up, and then they simply end their turn, and they do a combat too. Now, what's fascinating, I didn't think about this till just now. When you're looking at the board and it's your turn, your creatures attack left to right, and your
Yeah.
opponent attacks on your left side, which would be their right, to your right side, which would be their left.
Interesting. So there, you do kind of have this aspect of potentially there's a bad callback to checkers a little bit. What is it? Smoke and fire, right? So like that's kind of how you decide who goes first. White pieces go first. That's you have smoke before. I might have the terms wrong, but like white always goes before black, right?
Yeah.
So if you know who's white, then you know the orientation of the board. So
Right.
you know what left and right is. So it always goes from left to right. Kind of.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
Because I always have to look it up. Like every time I set up a chessboard, I'm like, well, shoot, which side does? Because you're right though. Like because the board is oriented in a certain way, to where like the white queen is always on a specific space at the starting, and the opponent's is always on the opposite.
Yeah, I don't know what the second piece is. It's always smoke before something.
Huh? I've
I
never
can't
heard that.
remember what the other one is. If someone knows that, if there's any chess players even or checker players watching this right now, let me know in the comments exactly what I'm trying to remember because I'm a dingus. But it's interesting, like how you said.
Yeah. So
The orientation of the board is actually pretty set
That's
because it
just a,
continually goes from left to right.
like I said, that's just a weird observation that I noticed.
That's
So
cool.
anyway, like I was saying, so they attack and it'll attack your monsters. If you have flying, it attacks you directly. Typical, whatever. It's the first to. Well, okay. I want to
That's
say
the
it's
other interesting part of combat.
I want to say basically it's the first to 5, right? But there's a scale. It uses a scale.
It
If you
uses
can
a
do
scale system.
if you can do 5 damage on your first turn, you win. Like
Right.
because the scale is boom right in the middle. It can go 5 positive. It can go 5 negative. Obviously, if your opponent is beating you and let's say they deal 4, then you have to deal that 4 back plus an additional 5 to win.
Right.
So it's on a scale system as opposed to a point system, but basically it's the first to 5 points.
I would say that a general idea, because the scale is more of like a representation of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
The goal is to be 5 points ahead. Exactly. Yes. You want to be 5 points ahead because sometimes at different intervals in this game, like you can find yourself going really deep into a fight. Like, and you see a ton of different coins in the scale and you're like, man, like this game's going a while. And it's kind of like high stake, high reward at that point where, if the game draws out a ton, which has happened to me, and you end up winning after struggling for that long, you get all those chips and stuff like that. You get all that, you win and stuff like that.
Well,
if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
You win.
So games can just like go super long, and
it just depends.
And it just like you're watching that scale go up and down the whole time. But
so that's important to understand. Like, why can games take so long? And it's because the game implements a deck building aspect, right?
yes.
So you always start with a deck of squirrels. I don't know how many squirrels, maybe 20 squirrels. I don't know.
Probably something like that.
And then you start the game with like 3 or 4 cards that are not squirrels, and that's it. But so you'll start on the board and then you move to a space, and that space may be a battle where you fight the person, and if you win, cool. If you lose, you actually get 2 chances to lose.
Your candles.
Which I'm going to touch on that in a second too, because you don't initially have candles, if you remember. But there's reason. But so like, and sometimes those spaces will be like, you'll go to the space and you'll be given an option of 3 cards, right? Card 1, card 2, card 3. And you get that option to add that card to your deck. So your deck grows. And so there's all kinds of different spaces. Then I think this is the biggest part of the game, right? Like you're sitting there, you're playing, you're learning, and then your opponent says, maybe you should take a break. Or you lose. You lose a fight. He's like, you know what? I need you to go and get that candle over there. I'm like, what? What do you mean? He's like, get up from the table and look around. I'm like, wait, what? What do you mean?
Yeah, dude.
And so it tells you to like press I think like S on your keyboard, right? And so you back up from the table and you
Yeah.
realize that you're in a cabin and you can actually move around and look around the room.
Yeah, the game opens up completely, and you're like, wait a minute. What game am I playing right now?
Yeah, I thought it was just a card game going in. And someone's like, ooh, it's also an escape room. And I'm like, well, I didn't understand that. I didn't know what you meant. But yeah, so you find out you're in the cabin. You see a door, the door's locked. And then there's like other things in there in the room that, long story short, are like puzzles. Some of it is to help you learn the game, which you find these like locks on, like it's like a dresser, like drawers.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle thing.
And it's basically teaching you different mechanics of cards. And as you do that, you open it, which adds more cards to your deck and future cards that you can get.
Something interesting to note about that specific puzzle, if I'm not mistaken, or I guess in this section, is at a certain point you get called in playing, because you do this and then you eventually you're like you are engaged with puzzles. You're like, I can't quite figure this out. Maybe I'll go back to the game and play it a little bit. The game will do this thing where it's like, well, why don't you?
Oh no!
Oh, Mr. Popular. Great slide in.
I'm back.
Re-entrance.
Dude, check out my socks.
Oh, let's go.
$100.
Billy's, baby.
Boom.
The Benjis.
Benjis.
That's
Anyway,
right.
my bad. My alarm went off
Oh, that's cool.
on my phone. So
So you're not popular. You're just prepared. You're just
Yeah.
You're prepared for something.
I don't know what that alarm's for.
Who knows?
I really have no idea.
That's true.
Anyway, so we're talking about this room.
So the game has a way of like, so it's, you start out, you, like Doc said, you get up from the table, you start exploring the area, you're met with a couple puzzles that you're like, man, I can't really figure this out, so I'll sit down. But the game eventually is like, well, you know what? Maybe you need to get up. Maybe you need to take a break or something like that. So you end up doing these things. You'll spend more time with the puzzles. You break it open at some point. I don't remember the beginning exactly, but you're met with these almost story, like these character cards.
Right. You
Right.
have, so you're met with a card called the Stoat.
That's right. Do you know him? Is he in your deck immediately?
Yes.
That's what I thought. I wasn't
Stoat,
sure.
The Stoat is in your starting deck. He's always there. And he's like your guide.
Like your mentor, kind of.
That like he directs you. If you get stuck, like maybe you're having a hard time winning. Or you just don't know what to do next. Every time you draw him or something, he says something, and he'll kind of help you and give you hints on like what to do maybe in the game or what to do in the cabin itself.
Right.
Different things like that.
And eventually you end up meeting a second one of those, right? And after a while of doing a couple more of the puzzles and stuff involved in the room, you met a third card.
Mhm.
So by X amount of time, you have 3 different cards now that as you draw them in your deck, they interact with you.
They interact with you. They interact with each other.
Exactly.
Which is super cool. And they're helping you.
In their story,
helping you
there's
play the
drama,
game.
right?
Yeah, there's drama between them. Like they're saying they're friends or they're not friends.
They're like, oh, geez, not him. Like,
Yeah.
kind of comments like that. Where you're
I
like,
love-
whoa,
and
what's going on there?
They have personalities too, which is really funny because there are instances where you can, in the actual game, like when you're playing the card game, you can like fuse cards together, and you can sacrifice cards to other cards to give them abilities.
Yeah.
And like sometimes, like the Stoat is a good example. He's like, no, don't pick me, don't pick me.
Yeah.
But Stinkbug, I think it was Stinkbug.
Yeah, Stinky.
Stinky is like, I'll do it. Take me, pick me.
It's so funny.
So they have their own like flavor and their own story, interactions with each other, and they're just really good guides to the game. And I want to applaud this game in the way that it guides you into what to do next. Like sometimes it's obnoxious, and like the Stoat is like, do this, and you're like, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah,
But every time you see it, it's like, listen, do this.
but I will say, like, this game is super organic, or maybe I can't say to everyone, because sometimes you have mega gamers that go in and they're like breaking the fourth wall the whole time. They're not immersed. But
Mhm.
the immersion for me was like, I kind of like read those things as tutorials and I ignored it. I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, I just want to play this card game.
right.
I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm playing. But
Because we thought it was just a card game.
Eventually, you're met with a field of bears.
Oh, if you advance too far too fast, or you haven't done the right things, you're met with a field of bears.
You're met with a field of bears, and
That
this is
are-
confusing at first
they
because you're
are-
like, "What do I do? I don't understand."
They're
For
literally
someone-
they're 4/6 bears, so they have 4 attacks, 6 health, and they can block flying creatures, so you're unable to attack directly.
Yes,
And 8 of them appear,
right.
and like glitches in. It's like too far, too fast.
Yep. So
and I'm like,
playing this game on stream, everyone's like, "Nope, you went too fast." I'm like, "What do you mean?
Yeah.
I'm good at Magic. Like, I'm a decent Magic player.
Yeah.
I can tell right now that I'm playing the card game appropriately and well. You're not going to tell me I'm not." But this game is a little bit more than a card game, isn't it, Doc?
I would say yes.
I'd
Well,
say
the
definitively.
fact that you can walk around the cabin is already more than card game, and do
alone.
some puzzles.
But it's almost
already
even
more.
just peppering it in, because it's still, as you get up, there are some interesting artifacts throughout the cabin, admittedly, but you're still kind of engulfed in this card game aspect, right?
That's the main drive.
So you're just like, all right, I should probably get back to the card game until throughout, like, this way or that way. Like you said, like, the game is super good at guiding you, no matter where you're at in the game. It's good at pushing you in the right direction that you need to be. Throughout this whole thing, eventually you realize maybe this is a little bit more.
Mhm.
Maybe something's a little fishy here. You know what I mean?
Fishy.
That's funny, isn't it? Maybe something a little bit more is going on here. And you don't necessarily, I think, notice that at first, right? It's not like that part is not super in your face.
Right. I'm trying to figure out where you're getting at, because you're being like super cryptic.
I mean, it's a pretty cryptic game. It's pretty cryptic,
And,
which, by the way, we didn't say this, which I think, fortunately, up to this point, there has not been too many spoilers. There's been a couple, but this is the point. Can we admit this is probably close?
Yeah.
This is probably close to the point where spoilers. We've given you the main mechanics of the game. You could probably
true.
play 30 minutes.
That's why you've been cryptic. I'm like,
That's why.
why is he being so cryptic?
So,
There are massive spoilers.
right. You see it. You got it now.
There's
They
probably
are-
an alarm going on right now. There's probably a spoiler
Flashing.
flashing.
Alarms.
Probably not.
fucking
I'll
horns
forget.
and
I'll
stuff.
forget to add it in there.
Yeah.
So you just
But,
heard us saying spoilers for the last almost a minute, saying they're spoilers.
So everything that we've talked about right now, you can probably digest within the first 30 to 40 minutes of playing the game. Now, take note. This game is not an hour or 2 hours long. It's a long game.
It's long.
So buckle in, ladies and gents and peoples of Scrub Hub buds. You're about to digest the rest of the game.
Yeah. All right. Here we go. Let's go. All right. Now we've given you the spoiler tag. Now we're actually going to talk about this game, about this story, about all the craziness that is Inscryption.
That's right.
Act 1.
Act 1, baby. Here we go.
Everything we said up to this point is still true, right? The gameplay mechanics, all that stuff happens. However, there's one thing you do learn pretty early, and that's death cards.
That's right.
Death cards are kind of what they sound like. If you fail, you get 2 options to fail, unless you found the 3rd candle.
That's right.
Which
That's one thing we didn't bring up. There's items.
there are items in it. There are items. So you get items. like some like scissors or free squirrels or
The
a
lamb.
jar of goo. The goat. It's a goat.
That's right. Oh, it is a goat. You're right.
Which is just another card that gives you extra blood. So death cards happen when you fail. The character you're fighting against basically says, hey, I've got something for you. Takes you into the back room that you can't get into, then snaps a picture of you and creates a card out of you.
Now you have a death card.
Which is made up. It's an amalgamation of your cards, or some of your cards, I guess, that you've gathered up to this point. And then essentially you restart, you start a new run, and you do it again.
Right. And this is a super cool feature that over time you'll come to learn that it's not only super story oriented, but it's also kind of a mechanic in the game to help you progress in the game, because as I'm sure you'll find out, or maybe start to get the feeling, there's a little bit more to this game than what you're experiencing right now. There's cryptic messages throughout. There's like ambiguity. Is that a word?
Ambiguity.
Sorry.
You just emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Yeah. But there's certain parts of this game that you find and you're like, man, I want to unlock that a little bit more. I feel like there's something more to that. And at like you get the death card and you start the game over and you're like, okay, there's got to be more to this, right? And that's when I think the game really starts to open up for you.
And so there are different instances. We talked about the talking cards, and they tell you where to go next. They help you to the next thing. Specifically, once you unlock the third card, the wolf, which you don't get until, if you don't know. So the game progresses across the game board. You encounter different things. Like I said, fusing cards, giving power from a card to other cards. You get the trader and the trapper, which are their own unique,
there's
unique
bosses
things. There are bosses that you fight and must fight to progress to what I would classify as a new area on the map.
Right, so you unlock it is a new area,
Yeah,
because
it's like
there's a little descriptor. It's like, you've entered the blah blah blah.
Because
you have entered the,
because the
blank,
person
blank,
you're
blank.
playing against is all about the story and the flavor of the game.
Oh yeah.
Which is only emphasized so much more.
Oh yes.
And so these cards tell you, and then eventually, so the stoat helps you and guides you to finding Stinky, the stink bug, and then they tell you about another card. So you're like, oh, well, shoot, okay, there's another card.
Which is right here in this moment is when you start to get some of the drama, because the stoat is kind of, like you said, he's got a personality to him. You pick up on that pretty quickly, and he's like, well, we have to find someone else. We have to get out of this conundrum.
He wants to get out of this situation. So like you're finding out, especially with the death cards.
They make comments like, oh, we're in this again. We're in this again.
You're essentially finding out that your opponent has a camera, and this camera is used to capture the souls of people and are turned into cards. So you're slowly finding out that these characters were originally people, kind of, and they were turned into cards, and that's why they're talking. And they won out of the situation, and the stink bug's like, hey, we know someone else, and the stoat's like, oh, no, I don't want anything to do with him. So you find out there's a third one, and you have to progress to a certain point, and you get a certain item. You get like a knife. Like you can actually, I think you can progress. I know for a fact you could progress all the way to the end, to the final boss. You could beat the final boss, and the game does a really good job of guiding you where to go, that it shows you like a flashback, and it goes to a scene where you see this guy like standing in front of a painting, and the painting has a knife on it, and that's all it is. So then it's like, by the end, you're like, wait, what?
Right.
And then it kind of hints you to find a knife or use the knife if you already have it. And the knife leads you to a really gruesome, like, cutting your eyeball out.
Right, and it's an item, by the way. It's an item that you find in the house
Yeah, through
via some puzzles and
puzzles.
stuff. And then you're like, "Oh, well, I have this knife," but you recognize that it's like, "Oh, it's giving me the animation scene the same as when I like get a normal item." You're like, "Oh." And then you go into battle and it's sitting, because you can see when you're in a fight with your opponent or your DM, your dungeon master across from you, you can see all the items you can use, like your scissors or your extra squirrel capsules, your goat that you can sacrifice. You can see all that stuff on the side, but when you go back into the normal gameplay of like your fight, you can now see a knife.
Yeah.
And you're like, "Oh, what's that knife for?" For me personally, for a while, I was like, well, I kind of put a lot of work in for that knife. I don't necessarily want to use it just yet.
Yeah.
And I played for a while until a very detrimental moment. And I was like, I don't even know what this does. And it gives this little subtext. I don't remember what it was. Maybe you can pull it up, or like,
Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe you guys should just play the game, because you really just
you need to play it. Like, if you're already watching, I assume if you're watching us talking about this right now, you've played at least this part of the game.
Right, you should have at least played this
we're
part.
Ruining the game.
Maybe we should say this right now. I'll say it right now. You've gotten minimal spoilers. You really should just, if you haven't played it yet, stop this podcast.
This is your second spoiler warning.
Second spoiler warning. Stop playing the game.
Literally stop.
Or stop listening to this podcast. Go play the game. It's amazing. But I got to a point where I was like, man, I don't even know what this knife does. I haven't clicked on it yet. I clicked on it and it gave me this nice little like subtext, and it said something ambiguous. And I was like, I don't even know what this does. Is this gonna help me?
Yeah.
And I used it, and like you said, you like cut
your eyeball out, and you drop your eyeball on the scale because it counts as points. And you're like, oh.
And now for the remainder of the game, you now have like the screen, like you actually like have a hard time seeing. It's foggy on the right side.
Only for the remainder of the game you're playing.
Until you go through like the end of with Leshy and all that stuff, and he.
Dang, spoilers with the name even.
Well, you dropped Leshy.
No, I did not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I did not.
Well, what's his name? When do you find out his name? I don't remember.
I think the Stoat says it at one point.
Does he?
But I think you find out before.
Okay.
Before the end. But you don't know for a good minute.
Well, I won't necessarily say his name again until we definitively know.
So the knife takes your eye out, but you're only blind for the game, that remainder of the game, that game that you're playing.
Right.
Because once you win, well, obviously if you lose, you're dead, and you get a death card, you start over. But if you win, your opponent,
your dungeon master. See, I kept continuity for the most part.
Slides a chest towards you and says, well, it wouldn't be fun if you're blind, for the whole time. Slides this chest open, and the chest opens up, and there's all kinds of eyeballs in it, right? And if you're far enough through the story that is being presented to you piece by piece, if you're far enough, there's a glowing eyeball.
It's right.
If you're not far enough, there's no glowing eyeball. So it's very possible to use the knife
too
early, not get the glowing eyeball, and still have no idea that you need to use the knife.
Right.
And so what the glowing eyeball, you find out later, is an eyeball that is to someone else, and it allows you to see things in the cabin and things that you wouldn't normally see. One of those things is the cuckoo clock.
That's right.
The cuckoo clock shows arrows where you line up the cuckoo clock to solve a puzzle. Boom, you get your third talking card, the wolf.
That's right.
And the wolf also, behind him, he's like, hey, here's camera film. Take this right now.
He's like, quick, grab it now. Because your dungeon master is like, wait, what are you doing? What are you doing over there? And then, you grab the film and you grab the card, you take it, and you're like, okay, let me sit back down. You start playing some more.
Yeah. So as we said, you go through this game, you've gone through bosses, and eventually, maybe you go through once and you get to the final boss, which is your opponent, your dungeon master, your game master, and maybe you beat him. Cool. Guess what? You get, honestly, he traps you in a card.
It doesn't matter if you win or lose.
Yeah. If you lose, you get trapped into a card and you get a death card that you get to use in the game. If you win, he immortalizes you as a winner and turns you into a card and slaps you on the door.
Right.
Unless you're far enough where you have the film. And in which case, you have to beat him now. So you beat him, and then his camera's like sitting on the shelf, and you grab the camera and you slap film in there, and then bam, you snap a picture of him, and it captures him.
It captures him.
And he's trapped in a card, and boom, he's just on the wall of the cabin.
So cool, man.
Super cool. And so that's that moment where I'm like, yes, finally, we're done. We're done with this game. It's been a super blast. There's all kinds of combinations of cards and interactions and things that we could get into, but we would just talk about it forever.
Yeah,
There's
we could
so
really
many
ramble.
things. And I've watched multiple people. It would be rambling. I've watched multiple people play this game so many different times, and I'm still seeing things I've never seen.
It's crazy.
Still seeing things I've never seen, interactions I've never seen. I just watched a Markiplier video, and he opened a box and got an item out of it that I've never seen. I'm like, what in the world, man?
It's so crazy.
So your opponent now, I think at this point you probably know his name. If not, you're about to find out his name. But he's gone. He's in the card. Boom. You turn. There's this glowing card on this pedestal. Flashing and blinking. And it's the new game card. And if you remember, we said that earlier, that you could only continue.
You could only load a new game at the beginning of the game.
You could
when
only
first
load
download it.
Yeah, load a game that was previous. You continue. So now here's the new game card. So you grab the new game card. All the lights go out. And you sit there and you're like, well, what the heck do I do?
Right. You don't know what to do now.
So ultimately you exit the game. Right? Like you exit, you go back to the main menu. But now you can play new game.
That's right.
And that's when you're like, that's kind of weird. Right? So of course, what do? You hit new game because you didn't do that before.
Right.
And then enter Act 2.
Or is it pseudo Act 1?
Dude.
Because it's a new game.
It is a new game. It is pseudo Act 1. So, obviously, spoilers. Like, if you're still watching this and you haven't played this game, we're going to just ruin this whole thing.
You got to play it. You just got to play
I
it.
was really, honestly, I was against doing this originally.
I
was so much against it, but I feel like you can't talk about this game and not do that. You just have to spoil it.
Because there's nothing to say about it if you're not going to spoil it. Because
all you can say is, this game's so good, this part's good.
Yeah, you either play it and then you have a conversation like this about it.
Because you can't talk about Act 2.
Yeah, or you just don't talk about it at all. You're just like, you got to play it. It's a card game.
And
you just do what you want with it.
Man,
until you're ready to play it, I can't talk to you about it.
We really wanted to talk about this, so we kind of decided that's why you got 4,000 freaking spoiler warnings.
Right.
So it enters Act 2, which is basically booting up the game again.
It's like I said, it's almost like Act 1 in a way, kind of.
I've decided there's a part of this game we're not going to talk about. I think we can do this without talking about it. Maybe. So the game, because I've already skipped it. I haven't even mentioned it yet. There's parts of this game that maybe we won't mention. So the game starts up. You're technically in Act 2. It's a retelling of the origins of Inscryption. It tells you about the 4 scribes and how they created cards. You have Leshy, who is the scribe of beasts.
That's right.
He's the scribe, and he used his magic camera to capture beasts and turn them into cards. You had Grimoire, who used her quill to write the epitaphs of people that got turned into cards.
Yeah.
Magnificus, who used his paintbrush and painted people into cards. And you had PO3, who used, I think it's like a particle machine to turn people and things, robots into cards. And so it tells you this whole grand like story of the origins of cards. And then it drops you into this like 2D freaking like 8-bit kind of a world that is now a adventure game.
Yeah, man.
You're like walking around a map, and
my immediate thoughts, like, dude, so immediate upon loading this up was Legend of Zelda 1.
Yeah,
like,
that's kind of what it looks like.
It's
that
overview
2D,
map
yeah.
where you're like walking to an area, then you click A on it, and then you go into the area. But it's completely 2D map, and you go to a certain place and you click A and you go up and you're brought to an area. Like, this is your destination, and you see a character, you walk up to him, you see a bridge that's kind of broken, and you're like, you talk to him, and they say, "Oh, this bridge is down right now. You need to go away for a little while, check back in a little bit." So you're exploring this area, and there's things to check out in the environment,
right? Because you're like it talks about the 4 scribes, and it talks about the player who has come to replace one of the scribes.
That's right.
Because like, so it drops you in and it says, and the player arrived, and the player is there to replace one of the 4 scribes.
That's right.
And then you get to choose one of the 4 scribes, and it gives you a starting deck of cards.
Yeah, it's kind of assigning your deck. So this is almost like, I don't know, dude, it's so strange. We're in Act 2 now.
Mm-hmm.
We finished the game, obviously, so we can recognize it as Act 2. But on my first playthrough of the game, I was like, okay, now I'm starting the game. Now I'm actually playing the game because I got my starting deck. I got to select oh, what deck do I want to start with? And I picked the Scribe of the Dead, was Grimoire.
Oh, so you're doing like bone cards and stuff.
Yeah, so I really liked the bone aspect.
I picked PO3, which was cool. The robot cards, which used energy. So 2 entirely different decks. And then you could have picked the Scribe, which is beast cards, and you could have picked Magnificus, which is magic cards. And they all use their own systems. Now, the thing about this that was super cool, so now you have an overworld and you can kind of explore it. You're still playing a card game, but the
format's a little different.
So you went from like this deck building type of a find a card random, and you're building a random deck, to actually building your deck. You start with whatever deck you chose. If you chose Grimoire, so you have mostly bone cards. I chose robot cards. Cool. But as you're playing, you find people to face off against. You beat them, and you get booster packs. And these booster packs give you 5 cards. And then you can take cards out of your deck, throw cards into your deck, and you actually get to build your own deck. And it's not random. So you have a little bit of strategy for you to mess with.
Right. And you also get an in-game currency. I can't quite remember what
foils.
That's right. You get foils. So as Doc kind of described, there's the 4 scribes, and you're running into different people. There's also shops where you get the opportunity to buy either a booster pack, where you get to pull certain cards and whatnot. There's different rarities of cards and whatnot, similar to Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, Pokemon, stuff like that. But you can also buy singles. Like, you can buy a what's the squirrel that you can repeatedly sacrifice, or like the squirrel ball,
pack squirrel.
There's just certain kinds of cards that the shops change too, so you want to check back after you make a couple fights, or maybe you fight a boss.
Oh,
or something
do
like
they?
that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I thought,
the items change in.
Like, I know there's a shop in each of the 4. There's 4 locations that you ultimately go to, and there's different shops. Each shop dedicated to that scribe and what cards they would normally offer.
Right. So like, excuse me, apologize. So the cards, like the singles, would actually change.
I knew, like,
I don't
when
know
you
how
bought a
often they
card,
would change.
I knew when you bought a card, it replaced it with a different one, but I didn't know they changed.
I'm not sure how often that would happen, but I know there was one, like maybe not the infinitely sacrificing squirrel, but I wanted to buy more squirrels. or something like that. Or no, it wasn't squirrels. It was the geck. The geck. That was when I really started trying to dig into the shop because
Was the geck in the second part? I don't remember.
Yeah, because the geck was it was
free.
It was a free 1/1.
Free 1/1, which was a big deal.
Yeah, the big deal was the free 1/1. So you could play free 1/1s that could attack still, but they're also versatile. You could use them to easily sack for other items.
Yeah.
They give you a bone.
And the name of the game's still the same.
And
deal 5 damage. You know, like get the
right. So the scale system is still
you still have the
basically
scale
there. So you want to be
system.
up by 5.
Yeah.
There were something we didn't actually say previous to getting into Act 2, which I think is important, is there were certain things as a Magic player, I was looking for ways to in the first act, to be mega strategic, like to meta max my deck while I could. And I did something with the totems because we didn't talk about the totems too much.
Oh, that's true.
Where I did the infinite squirrel. So if you sacrifice when a squirrel dies, it goes back into your hand. So you can just get in this combo of like play squirrel, sacrifice it, goes back to your hand. Play squirrel, sacrifice it, goes back to your hand. So you make infinite in my Magic players. Maybe I don't know too much about Yu-Gi-Oh.
Shoot, Yu-Gi-Oh has turn 0 infinite combos where you just lose.
So I was getting in
Yu-Gi-Oh is broken. I'm sorry if there are Yu-Gi-Oh fans. Yu-Gi-Oh is broken.
Yu-Gi-Oh might be more broken than Magic. I'm not really sure, but as a Magic player,
Magic is considered the hardest game in existence.
Magic is? I feel good right now because I feel like I'm pretty good at Magic. I'm not a pro, but
because there's so many cards and there's so many combinations, it's considered one of the hardest games to learn.
That's fair. So like to all my Magic players or my TCG players in general that kind of understand the lingo, I was understanding early in the first act. I was like, oh, I just figured out an infinite combo. Like I figured out the best possible combination for this game right now. Free resource? Sure.
Free resources, yeah.
So then but then Act 1 ended and I was like when you discover something like that, like game breaking, you're like, oh, I broke the game. Like I beat it, bro. Like I got it.
And the game takes it away.
And then it takes it all away. And you're like, and then so the reason I bring that up is because when I started messing with the shop and stuff, I was like, okay, ladies and gents of the chat, we're looking for infinite squirrels. That's all we're trying to do right now. Let me give me the infinite squirrels, baby. And there's more to work with in the second act. As far as
there's
deck
so
forming.
much more.
You don't immediately start with that because different from you, I picked something I was familiar with because it didn't necessarily tell me. I thought that the one with the dead seemed sick. It just seemed cool.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll pick that. And then I've slowly discovered, okay, we're using the chips and stuff in this one. But unbeknownst to me, there are way more mechanics that got introduced that I didn't know about simply because the deck I picked was using a mechanic that was introduced in the first part of the game. And of the 2 bosses that you have to pick from to defeat initially, first being Leshy and the second being Gamora, because the bridge getting to the second half of the game or this act is broken, so you have to do X
you have to be one
things. Of them. So you're not unless you pick.
What's really funny, real quick, like even the person on the bridge tells you like it'll get fixed probably about the time it takes you to beat one of them.
Yeah, it does. It's so funny. So
it's
good.
Like, it's like, just if I'm being honest,
right? So like, so unless you picked one of those other 2 decks, there are like mechanics in the card game that got introduced that you don't even know about yet.
Oh yeah, and that's what I did. I picked PO3. So I'm dealing with robot stuff. Then
you're like, what is this?
I'm like, what is energy and all of this? It does give you a small tutorial when you start using that deck. Yeah.
Okay, that's
to let you know. Like if you chose the robot, it says, hey, just so you know, you get energy every turn, and this and that, and you have to spend the energy to play the card. It does do that, but once,
right?
It does it one time.
So
if you're not paying attention.
So if it's not already implied, when you go to Leshy's section, he's the scribe of the beast. He's as you're playing these games, you'll discover this stuff. He uses squirrels. He uses wolves. He uses mantis gods for his creatures and stuff like that. Those are primarily
mantis
his
god.
creatures.
Mantis God is a nasty little card. It's good.
It's the card that carried me like almost the whole game.
So many good cards.
But then Grimoire, the Scribe of the Dead, they utilize more on which. Okay, so Leshy, he's more sacrificing, using blood to summon creatures and stuff like that. Grimoire is more using bones that you get from sacrificing stuff.
So when your stuff dies, you gain a bone. And
You
then
get a
use
bone.
those bones to summon more things.
Right. So those are kind of mechanics that you were introduced early in the game, which are the two, like I said, two first boss fights that you can be introduced into in the first section of Act 2. Now you get past that, you beat those, there's a ton right there, by the way, even just in those, because like you said, there's
so much. There's still more puzzles.
There's puzzles that you have to defeat.
There's several people you have to fight that gives you extra booster cards.
Right.
So we're kind of flying through this a little bit, but
there's just a lot.
much.
We're getting to a lot right now.
And it's not, honestly, it's not a lot of story either.
No, it's a lot of just presenting you with a different way to literally like experience the game as a whole, visually, audibly, even in a lot of ways, mechanically even, but it's still the same game. It's just like making you look and experience at it a different way, to the point where you're like, oh, this is a different game, but then you start doing, you're like, it's not. So you start to recognize it. You're just becoming aware of it. You're becoming aware of the circumstances of this game as a player, right? You're just like fully aware. You're like, something's going on.
You're taking
here.
something that you learned in the first part and applying it to the second part, and they expanded it.
Yeah.
In a really, really cool way. And it's about to get even crazier.
It is about to get completely blown out of the fucking water.
So in Act 2, so you have two bosses on the right side of the screen where you're exploring this world, you're fighting people, and you're fighting Leshy again, in a 2D kind of a cool way. You fight Grimoire. Once you defeat one of them, it opens the bridge to the other side of the screen where you get to experience Magnificus and his magic stuff, and you learn a lot about the magic cards, and the PO3 stuff, all the robot stuff. So that's how you gain access to more of those types of cards. That's the easiest way. There's shops if you prefer the magic, if you prefer the robot cards. I started with robot cards, so I had almost zero access to more robot cards. So I had to build my deck in a way that was actually beneficial to the first half, with beast cards and dead cards and a little bit of robot stuff. So I feel like that was kind of a mistake. So you're in this new game, you're in this new world, you're dropped in with the job of, your goal is to replace one of these scribes.
Right.
But you have to beat all four of them. Right? So you beat all four. You get little bits of story here and there, enough that when I played the very first time, I thought Leshy was a bad guy. I was like, Leshy's just a bad guy, just trapping people in cards. And that's just what it was. Then there was a little hint in Magnificus's tower. There was a book. And this book, Magnificus is writing to Grimoire, talking about PO3 and saying PO3 has this plan, this great transcendence. And he's like, this isn't a good idea. It's not a good idea, basically, and says, we need to make sure PO3 doesn't do this. And that's it. That's all the note says.
Right.
And so now, after you defeat all four of these bosses, you go back to these tomes where you found the decks in the first place.
Yeah, there's tombstones.
I didn't know if they were tombstones.
That's
or if
the
they're
way
just
that
like,
I kind of felt.
or if they're just like
plaques.
Yeah,
or something like that.
Almost like just, yeah, they look like tombstones. We can call them tombstones. So you go back to this place, and now you're re-given the opportunity to decide who you want to replace. You've defeated all four scribes. You've basically proven your worth. Now they're like, okay, which scribe are you going to replace? I still picked PO3 because that's where I started.
Same. I still pick Grimoire. I was like, I'm sticking with it.
I've seen people pick Magnificus, and I've seen people pick Leshy, I believe. And so what happens is if you pick anyone except for PO3, they all seem to say, "Oh, thanks, but," and like back away, right? And then PO3 steps up and is like, "My time is now. You're going to fight me." And you go into a final boss with PO3. And PO3 is like, normally you would have a big final boss with someone else. But he's like, but this is what we're going to do. And then this is a part of the story that I don't really understand exactly what's happening right there. I don't, because you beat PO3. No, you don't. You don't beat PO3. PO3 plays a card that when you attack it, it causes everything to go crazy nutty. You don't even fight you barely fight PO3.
The PO3 fight is like, it's you have to break the game. That's
PO3 summons this black, like super crazy, like glitchy card.
Oh, wait, yeah, you're right.
And that changes, and that jumps us into Act 3. Where freaking PO3 is like, boom, I'm God, and you're going to do this, and gives us this whole thing about the Great Transcendence, and now PO3 has Botopia, and so now you're back into like this 3D world instead of the 2D, where kind of like where you were with Leshy.
Right. So it kind of it puts you, so your format of thinking now is like, okay, so you get through Act 1, you're in the cabin with Leshy that you now, and then you defeat him, and then you get the New Game Plus card, or the New Game card, not New Game Plus. So you start the game over, and now you can actually start the game.
Yeah.
You start in, then you replace a scribe, go through X, Y, and Z. You get a little bit of story here or there, find out about this plan that PO3 has, and now you're thrown into PO3's game, into PO3's version of what this thing that we're playing is, like his version of the cycle is we're in now.
And PO3 is very much like Leshy only cared about flavor. Leshy only cared about the lore. Leshy didn't care about strategy. Leshy didn't care about this or that. And PO3 is like, it's strategy. This is a strategy game now. It's no longer this roguelike deck builder. It's no longer this build your own deck thing. PO3 straight up, and this is why I like PO3 so much. PO3 straight up copies Leshy in almost everything, down to the cards. The cards are robot versions of Leshy's cards.
Yeah.
And PO3 is like, but my way's better. PO3 is like, you had 4 lanes with Leshy, now you have 5 lanes with me because mine's better.
Yeah.
But Leshy's also a crappy DM. You know?
Yeah.
Like Leshy's like, you won, something happened, pretend it exploded. I'm like, so PO3 is all about the strategy, and only cares about the Great Transcendence. Only cares about you going through Botopia, defeating the 4 bosses to bring about the Great Transcendence.
Yeah, the Great it's all about the Great Transcendence.
That's all PO3 cares about. PO3 is like, I'm the greatest. You suck. Even in instances, it's like, your deck sucks.
Yeah.
And so
even like the bonuses you get throughout the map, because you're still exploring a map, right?
Yeah, it's just a different kind of map.
And there's like shop, or I should say a shop, or there's little like things you can interact with and whatnot. But sometimes when he gives you like a bonus to your card or things like that, where he'll take one of your cards away and give you a new one, he's like, well, seems like you could probably use it, so I'll help you out.
Yeah. Like it's like condescending and just kind of like, PO3 is just like, whatever, you're the player, you're the one doing this. I need you to, but I don't care. I'm better. And so it's a completely opposite aspect of Leshy, and that's why I like PO3, and it just adds so much to the character. And so you're doing this, it's the same map as the 2D world, but it's in a 3D environment now. Like, so you still You still have like Leshy's cabin and Grimoire's
Yeah.
place. You still have these people thing, and they're still the bosses. With some like robot technical things. And then you're on like this it's like a projection right from a computer. And partway through the battery dies. People are just like, oh, battery's dead. I guess you can get up from the table. And you're like shackled to the table.
Yeah, so when you start up like Act 3, you realize that you're shackled to the table because like he wants you to sit there. Like you're stuck. Like you're about to play the game with Pio. You're gonna play PO3's game.
Yeah, you're going to play. And PO3's like, fine, I'll let you up, but you go get that battery. You come right back.
Right.
Like you didn't. PO3 did not want you exploring. PO3 is like, no, you go, you come back, you sit down. That's what's happening. PO3's items were different too, which was really neat.
Yeah.
Because like Leshy's items, you kind of found or you got to choose from. PO3's like, here's your item, you can use it. And you had the ability to recharge your items, so they came right back, which was really cool. And PO3's like, use it because like once you use it, you can't use it unless you recharge.
Yeah.
But it's like, see how nice am I letting you be able to constantly use these items.
Yeah, he further like in bolstering himself as like a DM or like this is my game, like my game's better.
And so we say all that to come down. So there's different things. There's some puzzles here in this area. Your main goal is defeat the 4 bosses. You do that.
Which are all completely different. They have their own new mechanics now and their own new difficulties about them.
And actually, I think they were easier. Like, I
thought they were generally easier except for one.
I think there was one that was super annoying, but I don't think it was hard. Well, no, it was the one where like
tricky.
Your friends. Is that the one where like it summons your friends to fight against you?
No, the one that I'm thinking of
where
was
I
the
struggled
one
with that.
where you had to break the game, where it was like, okay, now let's add another rule.
Oh, the
Where-
rule. Oh, that's what it was. It was adding rules. You were creating
Yeah,
rules.
so it was like
and-
every time you played a card, a random card would take 5 damage, or
yeah.
every time a card was played, a new card was made.
So you had some really interesting bosses, some really interesting mechanics, but your ultimate goal was to bring about the great transcendence. And PO3 is like, this is what you're doing. And ultimately you do. You beat those bosses. You go back to PO3, and PO3 is like, haha, great transcendence. That's kind of the end of Inscryption, right? This whole time, we haven't talked about it up until now because I think this is the backbone of the game. The whole time, there's a real world element.
Yeah, there's like a real, like, there's almost like a, I don't necessarily like saying a role-playing aspect, but you're fulfilling the role of a particular character while you're playing this game that you're not even fully aware of. Sometimes you would get, there would be certain events that would happen that would pull you into a different section of the game, and there would be this thing you would experience, or sometimes a sound bite would happen, and it would be like, I can't believe this is happening.
Like someone's
Or,
talking.
Someone is talking and breaking the immersion.
Yeah,
And
it really did too. You're like in the game, and you're like,
and the dialogue itself is literally as if you're hearing someone play the game and they're frustrated with it, or like something
or excited
happens,
that they did something.
or they're like, whoa, that's super cool. And you're like, wait a minute. But it's kind of sprinkled in here and there where this like screen would come up and you would get the opportunity to explore a YouTube content, like a content creator.
Luke Carter was his
Luke
name.
Carter. He's
Lucky Carter.
The Lucky Carter.
He's
that's
a
right.
booster pack opening kind of person.
Super flavorful for the last couple years too, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So you kind of start to unlock this story. Do we want to touch on that story at all, or do we kind of want to let that?
I think I think this is a fair opportunity to kind of just talk about what is actually happening in this game,
Right.
and we get to talk about some things. And this is huge spoilers too.
This is the last spoiler alert, I think.
This is the backbone of the game, and I think that's what makes it so good.
Yeah.
So you learn about Luke Carter, after the first act. Well, after the first time you fight Leshy in the cabin. It throws you into a screen with some snippets of his YouTube channel of him opening booster packs.
Right.
Then he is opening Inscryption booster packs that he found at a garage sale.
Which we should backtrack a little bit to him in his reality at this current time, because there's a little bit of time interlacing when you're watching these. It takes some kind of discernment for the player to be like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
So he's talking about this Inscryption game. And for him, it's a card, like a physical.
It's a card game.
It's a physical card game where you open like real packs, like like you would go to Walgreens and buy a couple packs of Inscryption,
like booster packs of cards.
So for him, it was a physical, real game, not like a.
And that's
game.
That's a fair point. And so he opens his pack and he's like, this pack's been opened. This pack's been opened before. So he opens the pack, and dude, let me tell you what, he sucks at booster pack opening. Dude,
Yeah,
I'm
does.
like, dude,
His
just
content
show
sucks,
us the
bro.
card. Like, show us the cards. And I wonder if that's like because they're not real. Obviously, they're not real cards. Maybe they are. But
Props.
So he's like, hey, this booster pack's been opening. He's like, hopefully they didn't jack the rare out of it. That would suck.
Yeah.
And he opens it, and then he goes through it, and he's like, someone wrote on this, and it gives him like GPS coordinates. And we're like, okay. And so he goes to the GPS coordinates with his shovel and his flashlight, and he finds this 3.5-inch freaking floppy disk. And we're like, I mean, like buried like a centimeter into the dirt. I'm like, come on, guys. Like, it's super funny. It's super cringy. But he finds this, and then he takes that home, and he puts that into his computer after buying a floppy drive. Puts that into his computer, and it's a digital version, a video game version of Inscryption.
Which, as you come to find out, is simply just the game that we are playing and have been playing this entire time. So these little sound bites of this character getting excited or frustrated, it's really just Luke playing the game. And in a way, we are Luke experiencing the game.
Yeah, we're playing Luke playing the game. It's Inscryption. Inception. Inscryption. It's Inception. Oh, that's the word.
Inscription.
Inscription.
It's
Inscription.
It's dang it, I was just about to say something.
Inscription. So we say all that. So that's the backbone of the story so far. So we say all that to get to PO3. PO3 has this plan. PO3, go.
That's what I was gonna say. So like when you're watching these, when you get into this like section of the game where you're watching the Luke make this content and stuff like that, whatnot, and then he gets the coordinates, goes out to the wood. For those of you, you're the OG like creepypasta fans, the OG YouTubers, it's got like a huge Marble Hornets feel to it. Like Slenderman people, you guys know, you go back and watch Marble Hornets.
I don't know. I don't know
whole, it's like kind of a found footage, creepypasta style project that started out kind of displaying the idea or the story of Slenderman, but it did it in a really tasteful way. It was actually started out as a college project, but dude, that's such a huge, in my opinion, huge homage to pay to like millennial horror. I guess, because I guess one of the biggest millennial horror staples is Slenderman, right? And like all the content that came from that and whatnot, and Marble Hornets. That's really what made creepypasta, in my opinion. Well, one of the pillars of making creepypasta what it was Slenderman and all the Marble Hornets things. So
out of all these things that you're saying, I only know creepypasta.
That's amazing. So this is a small section for like the crazy YouTube people that know what I'm talking about.
Like, I've heard of Slenderman and I've seen the game, but that's it. Like, you're saying Marble Hornets?
Marble Hornets, yeah. It was a...
I have no idea what that is.
So there was... Quick, 30 seconds. Slenderman existed. It was like a traditional like horror story mythical thing. And then these couple guys or... these people in college, they were trying to make like a video project or something like that. So they end up making this whole fleshed out story of these videos, but they was like really poorly recorded. It was like heavily edited sometimes. It was super glitchy, and characters that were super scary. They were wearing masks, and it was super intertwined with the story and whatnot, but it was all a YouTube project. But I really think it captivated a lot of viewers by how interesting it was. And they would put an update out like every 6 months, and the video update would be like 14 seconds long, and it would just be like, help, bing, help, bing. And it's like, holy fuck. Like,
Wow.
we've been waiting 6 months for this video, and it's just like this crazy piece of content that's like
That reminds me
home-found
during the Cloverfield.
exactly
Movie, Cloverfield project.
very
Like,
similar.
they had months and months and months of just like crazy weird promotions. Like, we like something would happen, and then like 2 months later, they'd be like, "Hey, we updated the website." Like, oh, and you go to the website, and they added like one extra slide of a photo, and that's
Right.
it. And people are like, "What? What is this?" That's a whole nother thing. I love that movie.
But so amazing that like you're playing this game the whole way, but it's just peppering in these small bits of like de-immersion. But it's in this, and it's a very interesting way to actually add immersion, where you de-immerse your character and pull them out of the game super hard by presenting videos of this player or this guy, this
and it really
external
does.
story. But by the end of the game, so much of it comes together, and you're so kind of like understanding and becoming, you're under this realization that you are Luke, or maybe you're playing a song alongside Luke, and your destiny, your fate is the same as Luke's. Is like,
Or,
these things are happening to
and
him.
you're I mean, at the very least, you're seeing what Luke went through.
Right.
At the very least.
Yes.
Like, I mean, that's what I always think, like found footage things. It's like Cloverfield. That's, you're watching the footage that was found after the fact.
Right. So you're not okay. Yeah. So I misspoke. You're not like playing as, I don't know, because like there's weird things where like you're playing the game and then Luke's voice comes in.
Yeah, it's so like,
it's almost,
it makes
like
it feel, it does a really good job.
like a time continuum.
It does a
thing.
good job of reminding you that you're not Luke, but the most of the game you're playing as though you are Luke.
Yeah.
So, and it gives you enough control that you're like, cool, I'm playing. And then Luke says something, you're like, oh, gosh darn, Luke.
Right.
And it's like, oh, because Luke is the one who played this. Because Luke was recording the game. You're playing the game that he recorded.
It could be,
which is so weird.
It could be, I don't think I want to say what this is. Did you talk about the Great Transcendence?
I talked about PO3 wanting to bring about the Great Transcendence.
I want to save this until after we understand, as a Scrub Hub, what the Great Transcendence was. So what was the Great Transcendence, Doc?
Oh, we're going to talk about what the Great Transcendence?
I don't know. Where are we in the story right now? Like, so we've gone through PO3's
so we're at the PO3. So we've got to we find out basically PO3 has this plan, the Great Transcendence. Through that, we find out that PO3 has been guiding Luke Carter into finishing the game, right?
Pseudo finishing it.
Like, you fight a boss where you use cameras to create cards. You get PO3, you grant PO3 access to your hard drive and access to the internet.
Which at certain times it does actually read files on your hard drive, and you pick files on your hard drive to interact with the game. It's a lot of fun.
It's pretty wild. And I like, my thing got deleted. It's like, okay, your file's gone. And I'm like, oh, so I immediately looked. I'm like, okay, no, it's not really gone. But I thought it was.
Yeah.
So we're saying all this stuff where like we're experiencing what Luke's experiencing. We're experiencing like Luke's dealing with this real world stuff of trying to contact the game company to say, hey, I think I have a digital version of your game. And they're like, that's ours, give it back. Like, that doesn't exist, give it back to us.
And things get
and you're
spooky.
Like, wait, what? And PO3 is like, ha, you helped me finish this game. Now I'm putting this game out on the internet. And you're like, wait, what the heck is happening? And then the whole time, you've gotten these little bits and pieces of story, but this is where the story is just crashing.
Yeah, you meet a
Crashing
crossroads.
to a point of Luke's experience finding these cards and finding this game and what it means in real life. You're dealing with, you find the other scribes because you're in PO3's world now, right? You find the other scribes like hidden deep in the dark. They're like, we have a plan. We're going to stop PO3. You find out like this is a cycle that's been happening over and over again. And PO3 even says that. PO3 is like, this may be a cycle, but you helped me finish this.
Mm.
And it's like, and now because of that, it's going out here. It's going to the people, and I'm going to be the ruler a lot of the time. Like,
Yeah, for most of the
except
time,
it's,
like,
he accepts that maybe he's not, but he accepts like he's like, but I am.
and he's like, now the cycle will never end, and as it knows, like, I will have been the one with your help, like, Luke, I used
And-
you to fulfill the great transcendence, to upload it to everywhere so that I can exist for all time.
And it comes to this point. Can you stop the camera? All right. Anyway, so we stopped the camera because this next part's the heaviest part of this entire game.
We had to collect ourselves a little
And oh, dude, yeah. And it's just so powerful. It's so impactful, and we just didn't have the time to record. Like, we were running out of recording time.
bit. Yeah.
So all this stuff we were saying is that this all culminates to this instance where PO3 is trying to do this great transcendence, having Luke help finish the game. Luke's dealing with stuff in real life, trying to figure out what the heck's going on with Game Funa, the company that created Inscryption, the card game. He's dealing with like legal battles, talking to legal people.
People showing up at his house uninvited.
He's freaking out, dude. This game is like making him freak out. He's like, ah. He tries to do some videos of him like opening cards, and he's like,
So I can't
I
do
can't
it.
do this.
Like, my life is not normal anymore.
and so you meet the other scribes, right? And the other scribes are like, let PO3 think he won. Let PO3 think that they're doing what they're supposed to. We have a plan. And you're like, geez, okay. Like, whoa, whatever.
Yeah.
Let PO3 do the great transcendence. So you do, and then you go in this boss fight with PO3. And you beat PO3, and PO3's like, ha, I've done it. You've helped me finish this game. You gave me access to the internet. You gave me access to your hard drives. You helped me finish cards. He's like, that was the whole plan. And then, dude, out of nowhere, while all this stuff's happening, freaking Leshy just comes in. I think it's Leshy, right? Grabs PO3's head and just rips it
Oh, yeah.
right off PO3's body. And the other three scribes are standing there, and they're like, we had to do that. We had to stop PO3.
Mm-hmm.
And then
You're kind of left like, what now?
yeah. So we understand like there's this cycle, and they're like, we need to stop PO3 because PO3 is not just. It reminds me. This reminds me of man, I don't remember if it's a game. So I was playing this game recently, right? Tales of Arise. It's brand new, came out 2021. It's on the PS5. It's on the PS4. I don't know if it's on Xbox. I'm not sure. Well, but there's a huge part of this game where like you have one planet of people and you have another planet of people, and these people up here are above. They're top tier, and they just mess with the people down below, right? So you have this constant power struggle. So what they do is they have like a competition where so many people, each of these, I think there's 5 realms, and each person that's in the leader of those realms, they compete against the leaders of the other ones. And the person who wins this competition after like 10 years, they become the leader for the next X amount of years. And then they have the competition again. They're like collecting the souls.
Sounds like Mortal Kombat.
So that's what this reminds me of, right? So we know there's like a cycle. This game starts, a player comes in, they replace a scribe. Apparently a scribe takes over. Leshy took over, and that's how the game started. Leshy was the
You started out with Leshy already being in control. We
Leshy
were
was
playing
in control.
Leshy's game.
And so then you beat Leshy and you get to start the game over. It's a brand new game.
So it's actually like starting the game fresh.
And then PO3 gains power. And that's why you're dealing with Botopia.
Right.
You're dealing with Leshy's game while Leshy's... Or not Leshy, sorry. PO3 while PO3's in control. But something's different this time around. To the point that the other scribes are like, PO3 needs to be stopped. Completely stopped.
Yeah, they're almost like, okay, it's not a game anymore. Like, no, it's detrimental. Like, you need to help us.
Right, because PO3 has this plan. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to get this game out there. This game's going to get to the internet or whatever. Or however, it's not just a game anymore. It's way bigger than that. And the other scribes are like, cool, let PO3 do it. Then we're going to stop PO3. So they do. They basically kill PO3. And Grimoire then, right there at the end, picks up this book and is like, this is access. This is complete access. This is everything that we as the player, Luke Carter, gave to PO3. And she takes it and she's like, cool, delete. She deletes it. And which ultimately starts deleting everything that is in Inscryption. Inscryption starts beginning through an Inscryption deletion process.
Yeah, everything from the bottom up starts deleting itself to the point where, like, there's even, like, a little box that pops up and it, like, starts showing you, like, okay, X amount of data is, like, being deleted right now.
And so like, the world that you're looking at, you're standing in PO3's world at this table with the other three scribes, and the stuff just starts boom, 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 disappearing. And it's gone. And then you find yourself in like this crypt. It's like a crypt. There's like 3 coffins. One says PO3. One says Inscryption. Like Inscryption.exe. And one says Luke Carter. And I think you grab these plaques and you put them into this tombstone. And then Grimoire is on the other side. And so you get to walk up to Grimoire in a 3D environment, which you haven't experienced yet. And you get to sit down and play a game with Grimoire, like in the original style that we did with Leshy, and the style we did with PO3, but in Grimoire's version of the game. You're killing me, dude. You're killing me.
It's getting there.
And so this whole time there's like this screen in the upper left-hand corner of a loading bar because stuff is being deleted, and Grimoire is like, there's stuff on this disc, there's stuff in this game that she's like, it just needs to be gone. It just needs to be deleted. Does it suck? We're going to be gone. She's like, yep. And so she's like, but play a game with me. And so you're my bad. So you're sitting there and you're playing the game and you're getting a little bit of story, and she's telling you, like, this is just how it has to be. You're enjoying the game. Cool. Boom. Pff. Stuff starts disappearing again. Boom, 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 boom. And then finally she's like, you know what? This was good. Glad we got to play. She reaches her hand out and and you shake her hand and boom, she's gone. She just deleted. And then
I'm choking up, bro. Like,
dude.
I'm choking up super hard, dude.
And then so then it goes to Leshy. You get to talk to Leshy. And Leshy's like, hey, you know, what's up? He's like, here's your deck that you beat me with the first time.
Bro, like, dude, like, what?
And
what game is this, bro? Like, what game?
And so Leshy's like, let's play a game. Let's have a game. Let's have a good time. And it's all set up like it used to be. He gave your original deck back, and you're playing, and like you'll draw a card, and he's like, oh man, he's like, I remember that card. It was a good card. It's really cool. I can't look at you.
Dude, fuck, dude. Fuck, bro.
And so, oh man,
it's so nonchalant, and he's just like, it's all nostalgia the whole time. He's just like, it's like, remember, it's like, it doesn't even feel like that long ago because it seems like days, but like they lay on so thick that like this NPC cares about like the character so much, dude. It's crazy.
And one of the coolest moments that you have is Leslie's like, this is fine, this is cool. And you still have the scale, right? Where you're keeping track of points. And scale deletes.
It gets fucking deleted, bro.
It's
like,
gone. And he's like, oh,
no
he's like,
matter.
he's like, that doesn't matter. He's like, I don't care. I just want to play. I just want to play this game. I just want to enjoy this last game that I'm going to have.
I officially cried on this podcast, bro.
because he knows he's going to be deleted. Like, he knows he's done.
It's his last game. Like,
and
truly
all he
his
wants to
last
do,
game.
and he expressed, and so I said this before. Originally, I thought Leshy was the bad guy. You know, like, I thought Leshy was a bad guy, and it's like, no, dude, he just loves the game. He loves playing. He loves the story, the lore, the flavor behind it. Like, he was a DM, you know, like, he was the bosses, and he was everything that you experienced. He brought that to the table. And so the score's gone. And then finally, I think...
By the way, you're just playing the game for, like seeming... I don't even know how long
it goes
it is.
So... I don't know if
so
it's
long.
set turns. I don't know.
I don't either. I don't... Yeah, you're just playing the game for an ambiguous amount of time with no goal. You're just killing his creatures. He's killing yours. You deal damage to him. He deals damage to you. It just actually doesn't matter.
And this whole time, this loading bar, deleting bar,
he's just getting fucking deleted the whole time, dude. It sucks. And then the whole time he's making comments, like Doc said, about like, oh, that's a great card. Yeah. And one moment for me was like, he was like, oh, you triumphed my creature again. Like, I should have anticipated that. Like, yeah. You're a great player, dude. What is this? I'm so sorry. Super solid game, guys.
It's so good.
Super solid. Never felt so much like an NPC really cared about me. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the game, you're like, wait a minute, I don't want to be done, bro. Like,
spoilers.
Spoilers.
Anyway, so you're playing this game with Leshy. The score's gone. And then finally the bell, how you end the turn, disappears. And Leshy's like, oh, that's a problem. Because you can't end the game anymore. You can't.
Now the game's starting to actually fall apart too far.
And then so finally everything starts disappearing. Your deck disappears. The cards on the table disappear. And Leshy reaches out his hand and he shakes your hand. And he's like, thanks, you know. And boom, he's gone. And I'm like, at this point, I'm like, dude, like, this is the craziest thing ever.
Dude, it's been like a month and a half since I played this game.
And
holy fuck.
And so then so then Magnificus, right? So Magnificus, you appear and you're like in this empty space. Stuff is just almost gone. And like, it's like a pathway. Like, you start walking down, and as you walk down, stuff just deletes out of existence. And Magnificus, you get to the end, and Magnificus is like, why don't you just take the disc out? Why don't you just stop this? But the whole time, Magnificus has been like this like seer of the future. And he's like, but I know you won't. He's like, because I've seen it. I know you won't stop this process. And he's like, stuff needs to be gone. And so he's like, so let's have a battle. And you have this crazy, amazing battle with Magnificus.
It's pretty epic.
And like, I don't want to spoil that, because it was one of those things that it in all honesty, it feels like a copyright issue. Like, I'm amazed.
Yeah.
I'm amazed they get away with it. And but it's so cool, and you have this like conversation. Just whatever. Like, I can't remember the conversation exactly, but it's just another one of those things. Like, this is the last game. This is what's going to happen. He's like, stuff needed to be gone. PO3 needed to be stopped.
And this isn't like super quick, by the way. Like,
no,
these are almost like 3 boss battles, like back to back.
They're back to back. I pulled up the footage. It took half an hour.
So it's almost like the first fight with Gamora. You're like, oh my God, this is what's happening. And then through Leshy, you're like, wait a minute, I don't want this to happen. And then through the like Magnificus, you're like almost desensitized to it. You're
Because
like, it
it's a
just has to
character.
happen.
Magnificus is a character that you didn't get to experience, like, at all. Like, you kind of, he seems,
But you realize how important, like you validate him as a person
yeah,
at the
and,
end, even though you didn't get to experience him.
And this is the part that messed me up the most. Like, dude, I absolutely hated it. So you have this fight, you have this battle, stuff starts getting deleted, stuff starts freaking out and glitching out. And finally, it gets down to just you and Magnificus. And Magnificus is like, because of the way the battle worked, Magnificus is like far away from you. He's not you're not across the table. And he's like, no, don't let this end right now. And he's like crawling towards you. Like, whew. He's crawling. He's like, I just need to shake your hand. And he reaches out to like shake your hand, and it's gone.
Dude, I don't know.
He disappears. Oh my god,
This game is-
dude.
I don't know that we're gonna play another game for a long time, dude. For a long time that's gonna do this. Because let me say this. I've never played a game in my life that's made me feel like this game has made me feel. It's like,
It's
oh my god.
It's so good. And then he's just gone, and then the rest of the game just deletes.
It's just
And that's
fucking
it.
done. It's just done. That's the end of the game.
And then it literally, you have a little bit more real stuff with Luke that I don't want to talk about.
That stuff you kind of just, you really, for the end of this game, I think we even potentially gave too much away, but we're the Scrub Hub podcast. We talk about games.
Man.
But for this one in particular, you guys really just need to play this one for yourselves to experience the end part.
But so you have a real life thing, and then, dude, the game just shuts off.
It just
Once it's
actually
done,
is
it's done. It closes. The game closes.
And you're left sitting there like, I didn't want to be done. Like, I didn't want to be done playing this game yet. Like, you almost feel like you made such good friends with your enemies by the end of it, and you disregard so often that when you're playing a game, like, you're fighting against enemies and stuff, like big villains and people that you're trying to conquer, that maybe they want to take over the whole world. But in real life, when you're playing those games and stuff, like, I guess speaking from just me, like, those games became my best friends. Like growing up, Zelda was a big game for me, but like fighting against Ganon, like, I don't know what Pants would be without Ganon.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
we have to have our villains.
We have these games and that's what Shorts is, right? It's a short story of our lives in a game.
Yeah.
And so I get that. Like, there are games that I attach to me growing up, but this game will be attached to me forever.
This is, I'm willing to go on the record to say, like, this is for sure a 10 out of 10. Like,
Oh yeah, it's 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. It undoubtedly is game of the year for 2021.
And I'm sorry if this game doesn't affect you the way it affects us. You're just not a person.
You're just not empathetic by any means. Like, it's just wow. And you just, like, you want to jump back into it, not even because you like the mechanics of the game are so good, and there's replay value for the story and all X, Y, and Z, but like, you just realize that you had such a good time with the characters by the end of it. Like,
yeah. Even PO3, like, I loved PO3 even to the end, just because of the flavor and the opposition of comparison of Leshy. And I don't believe PO3 should have been able to. PO3 shouldn't have gone out like that. You know what I mean? Like, PO3 didn't even get a redemption. PO3 was like straight up just killed. And that's a hard pill to swallow. Like, going and retrospectively looking back, I'm like, PO3 didn't even get a chance.
I'm willing to, like, looking back with the way that, because you can go back all the way even to like Act 1, and you can kind of notice that, like, Stinky and what is his name? What's PO3's Stowe?
The Stoke.
So Stinky and Stowe, like they had a little bit of a connection to each other. I don't think they hated one another. I don't think
they hated.
And even at the end, I don't think that any one character hated another one, but it is almost like they recognized that PO3 was potentially the weakest. He was.
I don't even know that. It's not that PO3 was the weakest.
But they allowed him. The plan was to let him.
It's
think that he won or something. He was the most susceptible to not falling for the rest of the plan. The other three were smarter. But they knew. The other three knew that something needed to be.
I feel
put
like
to an end.
I feel like it was more of like PO3 out of all of them. They're all not great people, right? Like there are instances where they're what do I want to say? They have instances
They're
that
not
are just
perfect.
They're not good. Like their intentions might be good, but the way they go about things aren't the best.
But by the
And
end of it,
PO3
it seems like they did something that like was for the betterment of.
I mean, maybe like PO3 was the one that was upping the ante. PO3 is like, instead of just fulfilling what the cycle is, I'm going to go above and beyond. And that was the threat. I think that was like, it comes across like if PO3 succeeded in this, it would destroy the balance and the cycle that they had. And so they had basically no choice, but PO3 was also so cocky and was like, I'm the best. I'm going to do this. So they said, well, let PO3.
That's what I'm saying. He
let
was
PO3
like
think
most
they're winning.
susceptible to thinking that he had control, and
that would be the weak spot.
in the weak spot. But ultimately, at some point, and this is I kind of talked with you a little bit in the like mid podcast, a little bit when we were taking like a section, a break or whatever. But there are motifs to this game that I can't ignore in terms of like each of these characters symbolizing one thing or another. Just briefly going over, I'm not going to go too far in depth with like Leshy symbolizes, he's the scribe of beast. He like symbolizes vitality, like life, like action, the yang, if you will, not the yin. The scribe of the dead, Grimora, symbolizes death and moving on and letting go and kind of release, that kind of thing. Magnificus is kind of creativity and creation, exploration, that kind of thing. And PO3 is like intelligence and progression and moving forward, finding the next thing, which actually proves, because he's the one that's wanting to take it a step further. Like I'm the leader of progression.
Yeah.
And his negligence to believe that he couldn't be thwarted was ultimately his downfall. But while you're saying, like, I agree with, while each of them had their own motives in playing this cycle, they all wanted to do their own thing. And they all wanted to have control, but at the end of the game, like, each of them was like, we just have to be done with this, like, because there's things on this hard drive that can't be out, and we need to take this opportunity of PO3's weakness to put an end to all of it.
Yeah.
And just...
And I think that's where, like, I think that's a crazy part. I bet I would...
Actually, not all of them. That was... like, I should call back to what you said. It's Grimora's plan. Because Leshy, during that fight, which is why it hit me so hard, he was like, dude, I just didn't want PO3 to succeed. I didn't want PO3 to succeed, but I didn't want it to end.
Yeah.
Like,
and
Grimoire... I wanted to keep doing this with you. I was happy to keep doing this cycle.
And it's crazy because, like, Grimoire is, like, the scribe of, like, death.
Like, I'm here to end it.
And Grimoire is like... Grimoire even said, like... It needs to. It's not the fact that she wanted it to happen. She didn't want it to happen.
She didn't. She just
like,
said it has to.
It needs to. And I think if we were to take what you were saying, like comparing like the vitality and the life and the death and creativity, I would almost bet we could probably, if we played more, we could probably see an instance where each of the scribes... I wish... Oh, man... I hope this game has DLC. I hope it maybe gets a second part to where we can explore Magnificus more and we can explore Grimoire more, because you don't really get to until the very end of the game, and they're still so powerful.
It's so sweet. It's so sweet.
I would venture to say that even while Leshy was in control, he still borrowed attributes from the other scribes, right? And I would imagine if Grimoire was in control, she would do the same. If Magnificus was in control, she would do the same. PO3 is the one that's like, nope, I can do it myself. I don't need this. I don't need that. I don't need this.
I don't need you guys. Like, I can do
Yeah.
it on my own. Like, but he fell because of that.
Yeah.
You need each other.
So
That, for the most part, was Inscryption.
that was Inscryption. There's still some stuff and tons of stuff in there for you to find, for you to experience. We hope you play it. We really do. If you've got this far, we hope you have played this game. And you're not just experiencing through us. And if you haven't, and maybe this is like your first experience in the game, hopefully this has moved you to play the game and experience it.
Of course.
And again, hopefully it affects you the same way it affects us, because this is a game I can speak for the both of us. We will never, ever forget about.
Oh yeah.
We will talk about this game forever. And I hope there's DLC. I really do. I hope it continues.
Yeah. Immaculate work by the teams that did this stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
truly bravo, ladies and people.
I'm so
you know
sorry.
what I mean?
I apologize that we don't have their names or anything ready. I'll have them on the screen. Find them, support them, do everything. I hope they see this video. That would be amazing. And just let them know this game touched us in a way that's no other game ever has.
Truthfully.
And it's appreciated. And we thank you so much for that.
Yes.
For giving us a game like this.
Yeah. Keep up with the great work, and really looking forward to what else you guys are bringing out. And we have another game to check out by you guys, actually. What other
Pony Island?
Pony Island.
Pony Island is the other game. I think that was their first game. This might be their second or third game. I don't know like if it's the same impact as this one. I'm not sure. But this was a friggin' good one, and we're going to check out the other games because of that, or other game. But I guess
that's basically all we
That's
have
it.
for you guys today.
we're gonna find you real quick.
Real quick, you guys can find me on Twitch, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, NevrEndingPants, second E in the never, I should say. Not there. NevrEndingPants. You guys can find the links below. Doc, where they can find
Cool.
you?
It's weird we're back on the couch, so that's crazy.
Yeah.
Find me on Twitch primarily, on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, RX_Bishop_MD.
Reliquary of the Dead.
Reliquary of the Dead.
That's right, baby.
The Lich Doctor.
That's right.
You can find me. All those things, all those titles, all this craziness.
But all the things we could say in the world, what is the one piece of advice that we can leave them with, Doc?
If you're not good,
Get
get good.
We'll see you guys next time.
See you guys. Bye.